So the NFL trade deadline is just a few weeks away, and the rumors are really starting to heat up. Some teams know their season is over and could look to be sellers here sooner rather than later. And in today's video, I'll dive into teams that need players and could be buyers, as well as talk about who said players could even be. We've also got to get into some injuries and a couple roster moves that have been made from around the league right after. All right, first up, it didn't take long for the Ravens to release safety CJ Gardner Johnson after signing him to their practice squad just last week. CJ's agent, Kevin Connor, called the release an amicable mutual decision, adding that they were looking for a clearer path to play. This is probably best for the Ravens, honestly. Gardner Johnson has been known to be a locker room cancer at times in his career. The Texans released him after just 3 games because he was blowing assignments on defense, giving up touchdowns, and pointing the blame at teammates instead of himself. That type of thing isn't going to fly on any team in the NFL. It looks like Gardner Johnson is already trying to soften up his reputation a bit because he posted this on X yesterday saying how grateful he is for every coach and teammate he's had along the way and that he's excited to keep working and improving. Well, saying that on social media is one thing, but the guy has bounced around to so many teams now, it's hard to truly know what to believe. The Eagles need help in their secondary, and they're obviously very familiar with CJ after he spent the 2022 as well as 2024 seasons in Philly. But who really knows at this point if even they would want him back? Next up, there's some notable injuries worth talking about. For starters, Bears receiver DJ Moore was taken to the hospital following the team's win over the Commanders on Monday Night Football. It was a bit surprising because Moore was out there with the offense on their final drive and was seen celebrating after the win. So, yeah, a bit odd. The injury was described as a groin issue, but multiple doctors on X pointed out that there's almost no groin injuries that would require an emergency trip to the hospital via ambulance like that. Either way, all we have to go on is what the team described to the public as a groin injury, and the good news is that Ben Johnson told the media that they got some good news, and that is DJ is going to be okay, and he's currently day-to-day. So that's a positive update, unlike the news we got from the Bengals as they put tight end Mike Gesicki on injured reserve. Earlier this week, Zach Taylor told the media that Gesicki would be out for a while with the pec injury, and it turns out it'll be at least 4 games. Gesicki re-signed with the Bengals in the offseason after he had 65 catches last year, but it's been a slow start to his second year in Cincy with just 8 catches for 61 yards and 0 touchdowns across 6 games. Now, the team as a whole has been struggling very badly, to say the least, after Burrow went down with injury. Everybody's just been kind of trying to hang on and do what they can. And things honestly have been so bad since Joe Burrow got injured that they even reached out to Derek Carr to potentially come out of retirement and play QB for them. At least that's what Carr's brother David said. Well, that obviously didn't happen, and they wound up trading for Joe Flacco instead. And now at 2-4, their season might be finished if they can't get a win over the Steelers tomorrow night. And I'm not really counting on that one. In fact, it may be time to sell ahead of the trade deadline. And there's a certain player that makes a whole lot of sense that I'll touch on here in a bit. But with the deadline approaching in a few weeks, we're likely going to see all kinds of players on the move. The Chargers are reportedly in the market for a running back, which makes complete sense after they lost Najee Harris for the season with the Achilles injury, and Omarion Hampton is on IR with an ankle injury. Hampton is not expected to be out for the entire season, but the report is that he's probably going to miss more than the 4-week minimum on IR. Kamani Vidal filled in nicely as the starter last week with over 100 yards on the ground, but that was also against the Dolphins, who have one of the worst run defenses in all of football. Plus, if Vidal gets injured, then what are the Chargers going to do? So, nothing wrong with being a bit proactive and trying to bring somebody else in. And one name that's been floated around is Breece Hall from the New York Jets. It makes some sense as New York is 0-6. Their season is over, and Breece is on a contract year, but I'm not sure if the Jets plan on signing him to an extension. If they don't, then now might be a good time to recoup some assets instead of losing him for nothing. It's worth noting that Breece did say publicly that he wants to remain in New York, but at the end of the day, it's not really up to him. That's going to be on the front office. The Chargers would be a nice landing spot for him, or even the Chiefs, who have also called around on some running backs. Breece is coming off back-to-back seasons of over 1,300 yards from scrimmage, and at just 20 24 years old. He could not only be an impact player now, but for the future as well if a team ends up giving him an extension. Alvin Kamara is another name that's been floated around, though he too has made it known he prefers to stay in New Orleans. Honestly, it's harder to see Kamara getting moved since he's a franchise great and has been with the team for 9 years. So if he doesn't actually want to be traded, I think there's a chance the Saints just do right by him and respect his desires, even though they are 1-5 and their season is all but over. Jerome Ford is another option at running back. His role in the Browns offense has diminished with Quinshon Judkins and Dylan Sampson stepping in as rookies. Ford has nearly 1,400 rushing yards and 7 touchdowns since 2023, while also posting a career-high 5.4 yards per carry last season. Jeremy Fowler thinks he's a name to keep an eye on, so Ford could realistically find himself on a new team here in the coming days and weeks. The 49ers are another team that's definitely looking to buy, and specifically for an edge rusher. Fowler said they've been scanning the trade market for pass rushers with their ideal target being Trey Hendrickson. They consider him a good fit for their defense if they can pry him away from Cincy for, quote, reasonable compensation. However, Fowler did note that the Bengals have no plans of trading him right now, but they've dropped 4 straight games and are now 2-4, so let's say they go 2-6. I think the possibility of moving on from Trey becomes a lot more possible. If you remember, they didn't come to an agreement on a long-term extension. It was honestly a pretty dramatic holdout situation, and instead just kind of settled on a pay raise this year with his contract still expiring at the end of the season. Well, with how complicated the negotiations got for both sides this time around, it might be best for both sides to part ways. I think a trade makes a lot of sense for everyone here. It certainly does for the Niners, who lost both Fred Warner and Nick Bosa to season-ending injuries. Nobody will be able to replace those guys, but Trey Hendrickson will get you pretty close to the level of Nick Bosa. Plus, at 4-2, the Niners are still technically leading the NFC West, and there's a lot to play for the rest of the season here. If Hendrickson is out of the picture, though, some other edge rushers to watch would be Rashawn Gary, Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, Jermaine Johnson, Will Donald, and Arden Key. Those are all names that San Francisco is reportedly expected to at least check in on, so we'll see what happens with that. Jacoby Myers is an interesting name at receiver. There's been some buzz that his days with the Raiders are numbered. Pretty Ricky mentioned it recently on Twitter. Who knows? He did request a trade before the season started after they failed to agree on an extension, so it's kind of been in the making for a while now. Plus, with the way the season has gone for the Raiders, it makes sense to move on if they think he's going to walk in the offseason anyways. He'd make for a quality number 2 receiver or a low-end 1 for some teams this year. I mean, he has topped 800 yards in each of his last 4 seasons, hitting the 1,000-yard mark for the first time in 2024. There's a few teams that could be ideal landing spots. The Patriots make sense. Drake May has clearly made a second-year leap, and they could look to capitalize on that by adding another receiver to complement Stephon Diggs. Plus, it's where he played the first 4 years of his career, so there is some familiarity there, and he even overlapped with their offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels for a few years as well. Or what about another team in the same division, the Buffalo Bills? Their receiving room is underwhelming. It's Khalil Shakir and Keon Coleman at the top, but I think Jacoby could have a chance to step in and be their best receiver right away, or at least one of the top 2. Curtis Samuel and Josh Palmer are banged up too, although I don't think that's any long-term issue or anything like that. But honestly, if the Bills are going to make a move, it should probably be on defense because they're pretty beat up on that side of the ball. But what about the Giants? They showed signs of life after beating the Eagles on Thursday Night Football. They're 2-4, but 2-1 with Jackson Dart as the starter with wins over the Chargers and Eagles. 2 solid wins, though, yeah, that loss to the Saints was pretty rough. However, with Malik Neighbors out for the year and Darius Slayton dealing with a hamstring injury, Jacoby Myers could honestly step in and be Jackson Dart's number 1 target right away. Plus, it looks like the G-men might already be positioning themselves for a trade because earlier today they restructured the contracts of both Paulson Adebo and Javon Holland, freeing up nearly $5 million in cap space for this season. Now, it's also worth noting, the Giants were only $2.5 million under the cap before these moves, and Giants reporter Jordan Ronan said some restructures were going to be necessary just to make it through the season, even without any big-name trades. So I say that to say, I don't know that any big move is imminent for New York, but I could see them being a little bit desperate with Dayball in the hot seat, and it would be fun to see Jackson Dart in that offense with another weapon into the mix. The Steelers are an option as well. They've been reported to be a team that's interested in adding another wideout. Outside of DK Metcalf, that receiving core is nothing to write home about. Calvin Austin is their number 2, and he has 10 catches through 5 games. Roman Wilson has been pretty disappointing in year 2 as well, so I could see them at least attempting to make a trade, especially since their firm firmly in win-now mode with the ancient Rodgers at the helm. And regardless of where Jacoby could end up, Pretty Ricky shared today that the Raiders are looking to trade him, and he did not practice today either. So fans are definitely of the expectation that Jacoby is probably gone from Vegas here sooner rather than later. Then some bigger names that have been floated out there are Chris Olave and A.J. Brown. And even though I want some team to go and save A.J. Brown's career, I don't think the Eagles would move on from him. I know the vibes aren't great over there. They've dropped 2 straight, and their offense has been struggling, with an anonymous player on the roster reportedly saying after their loss to the Giants that this season is starting to feel like 2023 when the team collapsed at the end of the year. They lost 6 of their last 7 games, including the wild card round. However, that player did say they're hoping to get back on track this week against the Vikings. I think they're a long way off from having that big of a collapse again, and it really isn't necessary to trade A.J. Brown unless they think some of his antics are too big of a distraction. He's under contract through 2029 after all, and is one of the best receivers in the league. So I would think they want to keep a weapon like that around for Jalen Hurts, even if it seems like they barely even use the guy. Chris Olave is the more realistic of the two, in my opinion, because, well, the Saints are 1-5, and probably tanking for a quarterback would be the best thing they could do at this point. They don't have to trade Olave by any means. The team picked up his 5th-year option, so he's under contract through 2026. But if a team blows them away with a trade offer, maybe they would consider it. I'd imagine that Olave's concussion history might scare some teams away from offering a big haul, as he's had 4 known concussions in the last 3 years, including 2 last year, and that caused him to miss the final 8 games. Olave insists that it's nothing he's concerned about moving forward, so who knows? Maybe a team takes a chance on him because he's incredibly talented. The guy put up back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons to start his career before missing over half of last year. But what do you guys think about some of these players and teams that I mentioned? What are some trades you could see happening? Which ones are more realistic? And where would you like to see these players go? Let me know either way in the comments down below. And with that, I'll see y'all next time.